Hi children, I welcome you all to our history class. In the last video, I have made known to you about the civil war that broke out in Russia under the heading Socialism in Europe and Russian Revolution. Under that heading, I told you how the civil war broke out among the social groups in Russia and about the reforms of the Bolshevik government. These things I made known to you in the last video. And now today, in this video, let me tell you about Stalinism and collectivization. Okay, Stalinism and collectivization under the same heading, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. Stalinism and collectivization. And here, take a look at the photo of Joseph Stalin. Yes, Joseph Stalin, who came to power after Lenin. After Lenin in Russia, it was Joseph Stalin who came to power in Russia. He was also a military general, okay, military ruler in Russia. Stalin, okay, came to power after Lenin. By 1927 and 1928, the towns in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. See, my dear children, by 1927 and 28, the towns in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. There was no adequate food supplies. There was no bread at all. So such acute problem was faced by the people, particularly in Russia during 1927 and 28. Particularly the towns in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. The government fixed prices at which grain must be sold, but the peasants refused to sell their grain to government buyers at these prices. At the time, Joseph Stalin was in power in Russia. So he fixed prices for the grains. So the government fixed prices at which grain must be sold. The government itself fixed the price for the grain, and all the farmers must sell their grain at that fixed prices only. And this reform was introduced by Joseph Stalin in Russia. So the government itself fixed prices at which grain must be sold. But whereas when this reform was introduced in Russia, some of the peasants refused to sell their grain to government buyers at these prices because the prices are low. The fixed prices for the grain was low. That is why most of the peasants refused to sell their grain to government buyers at these low prices. And now Stalin, who headed the party after the death of Lenin, introduced firm emergency measures. So when Stalin came to power, so he introduced very staunch and very firm, immediate, exigent measures. Emergency measures have been introduced by Stalin. And here is the picture of Joseph Stalin, my dear. Okay, look at his photo. In 1928, party members, okay, toured the grain producing areas, enforced grain collections and raiding kulaks. Who are kulaks? Kulaks were well-to-do peasants. Kulaks were well-to-do peasants. And these kulaks, these peasants had some lands. They were well-to-do. They were well-off. So well-to-do peasants were called kulaks. So in 1928, party members toured the grain producing areas and enforced grain collections and raiding kulaks, because these kulaks are peasants stored up the food items or grain. Secretly they stored the what we call grains. That is why here the party members toured the grain producing areas and strictly enforced the grain collections and raided all the kulaks. They raided their residences and surrendered and occupied a lot of grain there. So these kulaks were raided by the party members and enforced grain collections. And then the system of collective farms called kolkhoz was introduced. And another important reform and the scheme that was introduced by Stalin government, that was called kolkhoz or kolkhaz. What is kolkhaz? It is the system of collective farms. It is nothing but collective farming. Yes, kolkhoz means collective farming. This collective farming was introduced by Stalin, and this is the system of collective farms. It is the system of collective farm, which is known as kolkhoz. Kolkhoz. That means all the lands were collectively farmed by the farmers. That is called collective farming. And here in the picture, you can see all the farmers are collectively and jointly farming the lands. Okay, all the lands are collectively shared, okay, by these farmers, and ultimately all these farmers collectively cultivate the land. And this type of cultivation or farming is called collective farming. Okay, and this collective farming was introduced by Stalin. It's a novel reform that was introduced by Stalin, and that is called collective farming. And this collective farming was called, in Russian language, it is called kolkhoz. Remember, my dears, kolkhoz is a collective farming pattern. Under this, all the farmers collectively cultivate the land. Okay, yes, and that land was distributed among all the farmers, and the farmers had to cultivate that land. That is kolkhoz, collective farming. Some of the farmers did not like this kind of kolkhoz. They resisted, but Lenin strictly implemented the collective farming in Russia. To develop modern farms, it was necessary to eliminate kulaks. Yes, to develop modern farms, it was, for the government, it was necessary to eliminate kulaks, because the kulaks were secretly hiding the grains and selling. Okay, that means that was black marketed. So for this very reason, the government took all the stern measures to eliminate kulaks, take away lands from peasants, and establish state-controlled large farms. Yes, now the government wanted to eliminate kulaks and take their lands and establish state-controlled large farms. That was the new reform introduced by Stalin here. And those who resisted collectivization were severely punished. Naturally, the kulaks and the other what we call farmers in Russia resisted collectivization. Okay, they did not accept collectivization farming. That's why these riots or farmers, okay, or kulaks were arrested by the government, and those were who were severely punished, and some were exiled. Some of the farmers were exiled, and some were given severe punishments. Those who resisted collective farming. Okay, dear children, and here is in the picture. Okay, you can see how the farmers were collectively, okay, farming the land. And now let me tell you about the global influence of the Russian Revolution. Global influence of the Russian Revolution. In many countries, communist parties were formed, because for the first time, my dear children, after 1917 October Revolution, it was for the first time in Russia, the communist government was formed. The first communist government was formed in Russia after the Russian Revolution, that is of 1917, my dear children. Okay, so it is a global influence of the Russian. We can see the global influence of the Russian Revolution. In many countries, whenever the communist government was established in Russia, so many countries, okay, in other parts of the world, so many countries, okay, yes, followed communism. And many countries, communist parties were formed. In so many countries, communist parties were established and formed. And Bolshevik founded Comintern. Bolshevik founded Comintern. What is Comintern? It is an international communist union. Okay, international union. An international union which was called Comintern. Comintern, not M. It is N. Comintern. Okay. Yes, Bolshevik party founded Comintern. What is this Comintern? An international union. It is an international communist union or socialist union, which is called Comintern. And Bolshevik established this Comintern. Russia was the first country, as I told you. Russia was the first country to establish a communist state, my dear children. After the October Revolution, okay, for the first time, the communist government was established in Russia. The USSR had given socialism a global face. USSR had given a socialism. USSR had given socialism a global face for the first time. So many countries had followed socialism, and so many countries liked socialism, including India. We too stood on the side of socialism and supported Russia. So likewise, communism, socialism, economic planning, all these are the implications of the Russian revolutions, my dear. All these are the international consequences of the Russian revolution that come under the global influence of the Russian revolution. All these are the implications of the Russian revolution. Communism, we could see communism, socialism, economic planning. The first five you know very well, in India today we are following 5-year plans, and these 5-year plans for the first time the Russians introduced, my dear. Stalin introduced a 5-year plan system for the first time in the world, and simply we are following the 5-year plans here today in India. So strong economic planning was introduced by the socialists. And dignity of labor, yes, they introduced dignity of labor. He that does not work, neither shall he eat. Yes, so they respect the labor force, dignity of labor. Internationalism, no narrow self-interest. Internationalism was promoted, nationalism, and they resisted imperialism. Okay, likewise, later we shall see the division of the world, my dear children. After the Second World War, world was divided, okay, into capitalist countries and socialist countries. Some countries supported Russia. Most of the East European countries supported communism and Russian communism, and they came under their fold, okay, socialist bloc and capitalist bloc. The whole world was divided into two blocks. Capitalist bloc that was headed by America, and the communist bloc was headed by Russia. Okay, that is the division of the world. So all these are the influence. We can see the global influence of the Russian revolution. These are the implications of the Russian revolutions, my dear children. So with this, my dear children, socialism in Europe and the Russian revolution, that is the chapter is completed, my dear children. Socialism in Europe and Russian revolution, that is the title we had discussed all these years, all these days, my dear children. Okay, have you understood, my dear children? Okay, then go through the textbook, and if you have any doubts, call upon me. Okay, my dear children, thank you for watching this video.